Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for July 5th, 2022. I'm going to continue with the theme from yesterday, which is to discuss the true mission of the United States of America, as opposed to the degraded role it is playing today as an enforcer of a global British empire. Now, this was discussed in some detail on July 3rd in presentations by Helga, Zepp-LaRouche, and Diane, Sare, which are available on the schillerinstitute.com website. And I would encourage you to go to that because they discuss this question of what must be done to restore the true mission of the United States, as opposed to the unipolar order, which is the United States enforcing today on behalf of imperial globalist interests. Europe has submitted to that completely. And for the most part, the political establishment in the United States has also submitted to it and is carrying it out in a series of wars and economic policies that are destroying the actual mission of our nation. And that's in fact the intent. The intent from the people who are running this, the City of London financial interests, their allies on Wall Street, their allies in Brussels, is to destroy the unique mission of the United States. And I want to just review that from the standpoint of someone who is extremely close to the Founding Fathers, in fact, the son of the second President of the United States, who himself was the sixth President, John Quincy Adams, who discussed this on July 4th, 1821. And this is the famous speech where he said that America does not go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. But he then presented the positive side. He said, America, with the same voice which spoke herself into existence as a nation, proclaimed to mankind the inextinguishable rights of human nature and the only lawful foundations for government. She has, in the lapse of nearly half a century, without a single exception, respected the independence of other nations while asserting and maintaining her own. And he concluded by saying, America's glory is not dominion, but liberty. Her march is the march of the mind. She has a spear and a shield, but the motto upon her shield is freedom, independence, peace. This has been her declaration. This has been as far as her necessary intercourse with the rest of mankind would permit her practice. So there you have it from one of the founding fathers of the nation. Now, what he was addressing is this idea that freedom is meant to be free from imperial control. That's what the Declaration of Independence was about. And free to act on principles which define what it means to be a sovereign nation. That's what's in the Constitution. One of the people who helped define that was Alexander Hamilton with his economic policies, which included tariffs. It included infrastructure in the form of internal improvements. And it included a national bank to fund the enterprise of building a nation based on physical production. Keep in mind, Hamilton was murdered by a British agent, Aaron Burr, who after killing Hamilton in a duel fled to Britain. Now, the battle throughout American history has been to maintain its true independence. From the outside, it was challenged primarily from London. From the inside, by allies of London among the Boston Brahmin, the Wall Street bankers, and the Southern planter aristocracy. After winning the American Revolution, we had to fight again the War of 1812 to keep free, the Civil War to defend the sovereign unity of the nation, while the Brits were working aggressively to support the South to break the United States apart. In the 20th century, we were engaged in British-directed warfare in World War I, and then again after American interests allied with the British helped to install Hitler, we had to again intervene in Europe to protect independence and freedom for the world. But after that, we ended up once again under a British-directed policies, British-directed warfare under the doctrine of geopolitics, which was the cause of the two wars in the 20th century and has extended into the present. In the post-World War II period, we've been engaged in colonial wars such as Vietnam, regime change wars such as Iraq and Libya. And these are defense of holding on to the power over the former colonies. Franklin Roosevelt said explicitly to Churchill, "Never again will Americans die to defend the interests of the British Empire." Yet under Harry Truman, under the control of Churchill, that's precisely what the U.S. did in much of the recent period. Now, Eisenhower was not a supporter of the U.S. as a British enforcer. In fact, Eisenhower, in many cases, remained true to Roosevelt, except for the fact that he allowed the Dulles brothers to control much of U.S. foreign policy. Kennedy was breaking free of that, and he was murdered. And Allen Dulles played a role in that, especially in the cover-up of what actually happened. Now, since 1971, the United States has been increasingly brought into the role of being what some people call the enforcer on a British leash. The globalist grouping in the United States, which is committed to a unipolar world order, has increasingly dominated policy, a policy which is against national sovereignty, a policy which is neoliberal, which is against government intervention to defend the interests of the people, and instead neoliberalism, under the guise of free market and free trade, keeps power centralized in the hands of a very small oligarchy which run corporate cartels. And since 1989, we've had a neoconservative domination of foreign policy under the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which stated explicitly that no nation should be allowed to challenge the power of the United States and its allies. In other words, turn the United States into a military force to defend the looters who are pushing for a world government over and above the sovereign nations. Now, in discussing this in 2011, Lyndon LaRouche said, "For this to succeed, it's necessary to provoke Russia into a war to destroy it. Then, once Russia were out of the way, the City of London and Wall Street would be free to write down their debt bubbles of hundreds of trillions of dollars and then build up a new bubble that would benefit themselves. In the process, they've been destroying the economies of the United States and Western Europe, destroying the legacy of the American system of economics, which was the basis under Hamilton's direction and revived repeatedly, especially under Lincoln, and again under Franklin Roosevelt and attempted under John F. Kennedy, which is the source of the productive wealth production of the United States. Now, in the process of destroying these economies and imposing a unipolar order, much of the world is in revolt against this global NATO, global Britain, this neoconservative, neoliberal system. And Americans and Europeans are now being treated by this system the same way people in the former colonial countries have been treated for many, many years, as slaves to the banks, a source of cheap labor, with their freedom limited to making one choice out of a selection of bad choices. This is the world we live in today, a world in which we're in a war with Russia, for which we should be allied to break the power of these globalists. The intent to destroy Russia is to make sure there's no alternative to the unipolar world system. And instead, we're being told that Russia is the aggressor, Russia is the autocracy, and that we're defending freedom, when in fact we're arming a neo-Nazi regime and protecting it as a battering ram against Russia. Now, in her address, Helga Zepp-LaRouche essentially said, we have to throw off this slavery. We have to stop allowing the brainwashing imposed by the media that's run by these networks to convince us that we're weak and must accept bad choices. No, the America of the Founding Fathers was serious when it said that we have a nation dedicated to freedom and liberty. And as Benjamin Franklin famously said, we have a republic if we can keep it. The generations that today are reaching adulthood have to reaffirm that tradition of a Republican sovereign nation. Republican with a small r, that is a republic. We have to fight not just to keep it, but to restore it and to deploy it to help safeguard the independence and liberty of other nations and other sovereign people. So that's my message for today. I'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll have a link to the Zepp-LaRouche, Diane, Sare presentation at the bottom of the description page.